The document you are about to read was discovered in a sealed folder in the Vatican's underground archives, section 16B, access restricted even to senior cardinals. I cannot reveal how I gained access to this material, but I assure you that every word transcribed here has been verified by 3 independent sources. Some names have been changed for security, others remain intact because they can no longer be protected. What happened to Pope Paul VI on the night of June 29, 1972, remained secret for decades, until now. The Roman summer was scorching the eternal city with temperatures above 100 degrees. Even within the papal apartments, with their centuries-thick stone walls, the heat seeped in like an unwelcome presence. Pope Paul VI could not sleep. For weeks, he had been beset by a malaise, not a diagnosable physical illness, according to the physicians who examined him regularly, but something deeper, like a shadow on his soul. "Something is coming for the Church," he had confided to his private secretary 3 days earlier. 5 nights of insomnia had already passed. The pontiff rose from his bed and walked to the window. St. Peter's Square lay empty at that hour. The vast spaces that by day welcomed crowds of the faithful now resembled a moonlit stone desert. That was when he noticed the silence, an absolute, unnatural silence. Not even the distant hum of Roman traffic, the nocturnal birdsong, or the whispering breeze through the Vatican gardens. Nothing. As if the world had ceased to breathe, then came the smell. Not unpleasant, but strange. A blend of very old incense, damp earth, and something metallic, like oxidized copper. And then the room's temperature plummeted. In seconds, the summers. Torrid air turned razor-sharp cold. Pope Paul VI could see his own breath condensing before him. "Montini!" a voice whispered behind him. The Pope spun around. No one had called him by his family name since his election. The voice was androgynous, neither male nor female, and seemed to emanate from every corner of the room at once. There was no one there, but on the opposite wall, the shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, as if they had substance of their own. "What was sealed in San Giovanni Rotondo will not remain hidden," the voice continued. "What Pio concealed will return. The pact is broken." The pontiff staggered toward a chair, his legs suddenly weak. San Giovanni Rotondo, the place where Father Pio had spent most of his life, and where he died 4 years earlier in 1968. Father Pio, the stigmatized friar who supposedly bore Christ's wounds, who could appear in 2 places at once, who read souls like open books. The same man whom Paul VI, still Cardinal Montini, had helped investigate decades before when the Vatican suspected his miracles might be fraudulent. "Listen carefully, Montini," the voice whispered now, close to his ear. "He was not what you thought. He was not a saint, he was a guardian. And now that he is gone, what he contained is breaking free." The Pope tried to call for help, but found he could not speak. An invisible weight compressed his chest. The shadows on the wall coalesced into an ancient script, symbols he had never seen but which, in a disturbingly familiar way, seemed to stir memories in his mind. The stigmata were not his, they were ours, marks of the covenant, a borrowed body to contain what should not be free. Now we return to the world, first through dreams, then through flesh. That same night, miles away in the village of Pietramurata, Father Alessandro Donati awoke screaming, drenched in sweat. He had dreamed of Father Pio, his former mentor. In the dream, the elderly Capuchin stood before a colossal stone door set into a mountainside. Blood flowed not only from his stigmata, but from his entire body, forming strange symbols on the ground. "They want to come back, Alessandro," Father Pio said. "They use my wounds as gateways." "Father Alessandro," had served unofficially as Father Pio's secretary during the last 2 years of the stigmatized friar's life. Few knew that during that time he had meticulously recorded conversations and confessions that were never revealed to the public or even to the church hierarchy. He kept his notes hidden in a secret compartment beneath the floorboards of his modest rectory. After the dream, compelled by an inexplicable force, Alessandro pried up the loose floorboard beneath his bed and retrieved a bundle of leather-bound journals. He lit a candle. The electricity appeared to have failed throughout the village, and opened the first volume. The tremulous handwriting was his own, yet now it seemed penned by someone else. July 1967. Father Pio summoned me after the afternoon confessions. He looked exhausted, paler than usual. "There is something I must tell you," he said, "something that cannot be written while I live." Then he described what truly happened in 1918 when the stigmata first appeared. It was not Christ who marked him, as everyone believes. It was something else, something he encountered during prayers in the mountain cave, something ancient that needed a host, a voluntary jailer. The wounds were contact points, not with divinity, but with another reality threatening to overflow into ours. For 50 years, he contained it in his own flesh through constant suffering and prayer. "I grow tired, Alessandro," he told me. "When I depart, they will attempt to return. You must find the other guardians." Alessandro snapped the journal shut with trembling hands. It could not be real. Perhaps the ramblings of a sick old man or his own distorted interpretations. But the dream, and now the blackout in the entire village, and the unsettling silence outside. He went to the window. A full moon lit the empty streets. No wind, no barking dog, no distant car noise. Then he saw it. In the middle of the piazza, a hooded figure stared directly at his house. As their eyes met, the figure made a hand gesture, one that Alessandro recognized at once. It was one of the secret signs Father Pio had taught only to his closest confidants, a warning of imminent danger and the need to flee. Back in the Vatican, Pope Paul VI finally found his voice. "What do you want?" he stammered at the invisible presence. "We want what we have always wanted, to return. This world was ours before your gods, before your species ruled the earth. We were banished to the interstices between realities. Father Pio was the last of an ancient line of guardians. Now that line is broken." The Pope reached for the crucifix on his bedside table and held it aloft, trembling. "In Christ's name." A guttural laugh, like stones grinding, cut him off. "Your Christ knew of us. In the desert, he was tempted not only by what you call the devil, but by us as well. Legions, he named us. Not because we are many, but because we are ancient as armies. We are what remains of those who came before. And we will return through the fleshly portals that Pio kept sealed with his pain and his faith." The temperature kept falling. Ice crystals formed on the pontiff's fingertips. The crucifix burned with a cold so intense it felt like fire. "We know you sent men to San Giovanni Rotondo, that you guard his tomb, but his body is not what matters. It is the relics, the preserved blood, the stigmata bandages. Each fragment is a gateway, and your sentinels have fallen." At that moment, the papal chamber door burst open. 2 Swiss guards rushed in, alarmed. "Holy Father, we heard voices." The presence vanished instantly. The summer heat washed back into the room like a wave. Pope Paul VI, pale and shaking, beckoned them closer. "Contact Cardinal Benelli immediately," he ordered in a weak voice. "Tell him to dispatch the special team to San Giovanni Rotondo. Protocol Omega is in effect." The guards exchanged confused looks, but obeyed without question. Protocol Omega was rarely mentioned, known only to the Church's highest echelons. It was the code for situations involving direct supernatural threats to the Church, physical manifestations of what the Vatican classified as hostile entities of indeterminate origin. Meanwhile, in Pietramurata, Father Alessandro tossed clothes and his precious journals into a backpack. The hooded figure had vanished from the piazza, but he knew he had no time to lose. Father Pio's words rang in his head. "If you ever see the sign, do not wait for dawn. Go to the address I gave you. Find the professor. He will know what to do." The address was in Turin, a Professor Gabriele Amorth, whom Alessandro had never met, but whom Father Pio had spoken of with great respect. He studied what few dared to study. He knows the true history, the history before history. Driving his old Fiat down the deserted road, Alessandro could not stop glancing. In his rear-view mirror, no headlights pursued him, yet the feeling of being followed never left. The radio produced only static, no matter the station. Occasionally, isolated words emerged from the white noise, words in a language he did not recognize, but that sent chills down his spine. The road wound through dark hills. Alessandro was 30 miles from his village when he saw lights blocking the roadway ahead, vehicle headlights, and what appeared to be swinging lanterns. A police checkpoint? Unlikely on a back road at that hour. He slowed, preparing to stop, when something in the glare froze his blood. Those seeking the truth about the Guardians and the beings beyond the veil find support and protection in this space. You are not alone on this journey. Continue to follow us for revelations few dare to share. Among the figures on the road, intermittently lit by headlights, were men wearing long tunics or cloaks. Above them, barely visible in the darkness, floated translucent forms twisted at impossible angles. Without hesitation, Alessandro jerked the wheel onto a dirt track to the right, a secondary path he knew would eventually lead to a main highway, albeit by a much longer route. The headlights behind him veered immediately in pursuit. In the Vatican, an emergency meeting convened in the private chamber adjacent to the papal library. Paul VI, still visibly shaken, spoke in a low voice with Cardinal Benelli and a sharply dressed man bearing no visible credentials. On the table between them lay an ancient dossier, sealed with the mark of the Congregatio Sancti Officii, the old name for today's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. The reports from 1919 were accurate then, the suited man said, leafing through yellowed pages. The initial investigation into Father Pio's stigmata was driven not by theological skepticism, but by suspicions of something far more unusual. Cardinal Gaspari suspected as much, replied Paul VI. He sent investigators who were more than theologians, experts in the occult, men who had studied similar manifestations elsewhere in the world. What they found was kept under the strictest confidence. Cardinal Benelli pointed to a black and white photograph in the dossier, a faded image of a young Father Pio, his nascent stigmata visible. Notice the blood patterns around the wounds. They aren't random, they're symbols, the same that appeared in that archaeological discovery in Turkey in 1908. Göbekli Tepe, the suited man murmured. The buried temple, at least 12,000 years old. Older than any known civilization, added Paul VI, built when our ancestors were still hunter-gatherers, except that they could not have built it, interrupted Cardinal Benelli. The astronomical precision, the mathematical symbols, they were millennia ahead of their time. The man in the suit closed the dossier slowly. We always assumed this knowledge was bestowed by God upon early humans. But what if it was left by others? Not divine, not demonic in the traditional sense, but prior, beings already here. When humanity arose, Paul VI folded his trembling hands. The entity that visited me spoke of banishment, of confinement. It spoke of return. A heavy silence fell over the room. Cardinal Benelli finally broke it. The 4 men we sent to San Giovanni Rotondo yesterday, they have not made contact. Dispatch the special unit at once, the Pope ordered, and contact Professor Amorth in Turin. If anyone can make sense of what we're facing, it's him. On a highway 100 miles away, Alessandro drove at high speed, glancing between the road and his mirror. The pursuing vehicle had vanished as mysteriously as it appeared, but he dared not slow. The radio static had ceased altogether, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to swallow even the engine's roar. Then his phone rang, a normal ring that nearly made him jump. The number was unknown. "Hello," he answered cautiously, eyes still on the road. "Father Alessandro Donati." The voice was deep, professional. "My name is Gabriele Amorth. We haven't met, but we share a friend, or at least we did." A chill ran down Alessandro's spine. "Professor Amorth, how did you get my number? That's not important. What matters is that you're in danger, and not just you. All of us are." There was a pause. "You have the journals, don't you? The records you kept on Father Pio." "Yes, but how did you—" "Listen carefully," Amorth interrupted. "Do not come to Turin. That's the first place they'll look for you. Instead, drive to Monte Sant'Angelo. There's a cave beneath the Church of St. Michael, an ancient sanctuary, far older than the Christian basilica above. Seek out a man named Vittorio. He will bring you to safety." "Professor, what is happening? What were those things on the road? What Father Pio contained for 50 years is breaking free. Guardians before him did the same, going back millennia. There has always been someone to serve as vessel, so to speak, to maintain the balance, to keep them from fully crossing over." "Them? Exactly what are we talking about?" There was a long silence. When Amorth spoke again, his voice was lower. "The Church has many secrets, Father Alessandro. Some are kept even from the popes. Some go back to the earliest days of Christianity or before. Have you ever wondered why so many early churches were built atop pagan temples? It wasn't mere symbolism, it was containment, quarantine." Alessandro swallowed hard. "And Father Pio? How did he become involved?" "The stigmata were never miracles in the way people think. They were wounds of sacrifice, sealed portals in his flesh. He volunteered, do you understand? After discovering what he did in that cave in 1918, he became a living seal, using his own agony as the lock." A bright light suddenly flooded Alessandro's car, high beams from directly behind him. "They're following me again," he said urgently. "Do not stop, under no circumstances. Reach Monte Sant'Angelo before dawn. And Father—" "Yes?" "The symbols in your journals. Do not attempt to translate them. Do not read them aloud. Words have power. Some words are more than sounds. They are keys." The call ended. Instantly, the vehicle behind accelerated, drawing closer. It was no police car, nor any vehicle he recognized. It seemed a monstrous shadow with headlights stalking him through the night. In the Vatican, the emergency meeting had grown with the arrival of a fourth figure, a Dominican friar whose scarred face and heterochromatic eyes, one blue, one nearly black, gave him a disturbing presence. "Father Ignacio," Paul VI greeted. "Thank you for coming so quickly." The Dominican bowed slightly. "When Protocol Omega is invoked, Holy Father, my order responds without hesitation. We have guarded this knowledge for 700 years, for moments such as this. So you know what we face?" "I'm afraid so." Father Ignacio withdrew an ancient volume bound in a material not quite leather. One of 9 surviving copies of the Liber Ante Omnia, the book before all things, written in the 9th century but containing texts far older, transcribed and preserved by our order. He opened it carefully. The pages were covered in dense script across Latin, Greek, Aramaic, and other unknown systems. "According to these records," Ignacio continued, Before the creation described in Genesis, even before the fall of the rebel angels, there were other presences on earth. Not angels, not demons as we understand them, something different. When God created humankind, these entities were displaced, confined to dimensions adjacent to ours. How does that relate to Father Pio? Asked the suited man. Throughout human history, Father Ignacio said, there have been moments when the barrier between these dimensions thinned. Wars, natural cataclysms, specific astronomical alignments. In 1918, the end of World War I combined with the Spanish flu created what we call a negative conjunction, a point of fragility in the veil between worlds. And Father Pio encountered one of those points, Paul VI concluded. Precisely, in the cave of Monte Sant'Angelo, a site revered since pre-Christian times, he found what should not be found and did what the guardians before him did, offered his own flesh as a living seal. But now he is dead, Cardinal Benelli said, and the seal is broken. Not completely, not yet. Father Ignacio pointed to a medieval illustration in the book, a man whose body bore symbols like the stigmata. Father Pio's relics, the preserved blood, the wrappings of his wounds, even his personal effects, still hold some containment power, but it is waning quickly. And this entity that visited me? Asked the Pope. Is it one of them trying to return? Not directly. Think of it as a herald, a forerunner testing the barrier, seeking weaknesses. The true ancients are far more powerful and incomprehensible to human minds. A phone on the table rang. Cardinal Benelli answered, listened briefly, and hung up with a grave expression. We've lost contact with the team at San Giovanni Rotondo, he announced. And there are reports of inexplicable phenomena in the region. Lights in the sky, animals found dead in precise patterns, and people having identical dreams of a stigmatized monk trying to speak but being silenced by shadows. On the road to Monte Sant'Angelo, Alessandro struggled to keep control of his car. The pursuing vehicle had vanished as mysteriously as it came, but now a dense fog obscured the road, an impossibility in that region at this time of year. The mist seemed alive, drifting against the wind, forming shapes that for moments looked like faces or elongated figures, and in Alessandro's mind, foreign visions emerged, memories not his own, glimpses of places he'd never been. He saw a cave, bathed in blue light, impossible forms crawling across its walls. He saw Father Pio, young and terrified, kneeling before something his mind refused to comprehend. He saw blood inscribing symbols on stone floors and heard words in a language that made his brain ache to process. Then, for an instant, he saw something more, a truth so vast and terrible that his sanity teetered on the edge. The reality we know is but a thin veneer over abysses of existence the human mind cannot fathom. And now that veneer was ripping. Alessandro blinked hard, forcing himself to focus on the road ahead. The fog began to clear, and he made out lights. On the horizon, Monte Sant'Angelo. He was nearly there. He then noticed movement in the passenger seat, something that hadn't been there before. An elderly man in a brown capuchin habit, Father Pio, exactly as in the photographs Alessandro knew, except his eyes were not human. They were windows to a cosmic void teeming with indescribable motion. They use my image, the apparition said, in a voice identical to Father Pio's, but with an underlying metallic resonance. They use my memories, my connection to you. Alessandro nearly swerved off the road. You're not real, he muttered. A hallucination. I am as real as you allow me to be, replied the figure. But that matters little now. What matters is, you must not go to the cave. It is a trap. But Professor Amorth told me to go there. A strange, overly wide smile spread across the apparition's lips. Are you sure it was truly Amorth? Phone lines are just waves in the air, easy to intercept, easy to imitate. Alessandro felt a chill. What if it were true? What if the call had been faked? Then where should I go? He asked, unsure why he was even speaking to a vision. To Rome, to the Vatican. Take the journals directly to the Pope. He will know what to do. Something about that suggestion felt wrong. If these entities were as powerful as they seemed, the Vatican would be the first place they'd try to infiltrate. The spiritual heart of Catholicism, where one deed could sway billions of believers. No, Alessandro said firmly, I will follow the original plan. The apparition's expression shifted. Predatory gleams appeared in its alien eyes. You err, Alessandro, an error that will cost not only your life but your soul. If I am wrong, may God help me. But I do not believe you are divine, nor even Father Pio's spirit. The figure began to warp, its human form stretching and twisting into something Alessandro's mind refused to fully register. You could have a place in what is coming, it hissed in a voice no longer imitating Father Pio. When the veil falls, those who serve us will be rewarded. Alessandro gripped the crucifix hanging from the rearview mirror. In Christ's name. The creature let out a sound, part laugh, part scream, then dissolved into a black mist drawn out of the car through the window seams. Alessandro exhaled, trembling violently, but kept the car on the road. Moments later, he entered the outskirts of Monte Sant'Angelo, an ancient town perched atop a mountain. The streets were deserted, unsurprising at nearly 4 in the morning. At the town's heart stood the sanctuary of St. Michael the Archangel, built over a cave, said to be the apparition site of the Archangel in the 5th century. Alessandro parked and approached the sanctuary's entrance. It was locked, of course, but a lone figure sat on the steps, a white-bearded old man in simple peasant clothes. You are the priest from Pietramurata, the man said, as Alessandro drew near. Not a question. Yes, I'm looking for Vittorio. I am he. I've been waiting. The old man rose with difficulty. Come, it's not safe out here. He guided Alessandro to a nearly hidden side door carved into the mountain's rock. Using an ancient key, he unlocked it and gestured for Alessandro to follow. They descended a narrow stairway hewn directly into the stone. The air grew colder and damper with each step, and Alessandro realized they were going far below the tourist cave known to pilgrims. At the back are your journals, Vittorio said, not a question again. Yes, how do you know of them? Because I was there when it began in 1918. I was a boy, an assistant to the hermit living in the lower caverns, the man Father Pio met before the incident. They emerged into a vast underground chamber lit by oil lamps. The walls bore ancient symbols, some recognizably Christian, others far older and strange. At the chamber's center stood a stone table displaying carefully arranged objects, a chalice, a very old book, and what looked like a blood-stained cloth. That is one of Father Pio's original stigmata bandages, Vittorio explained, pointing to the fabric. Preserved all these years as a relic, but it is more than that. It is an anchor, a key, a seal. What do we do now? Alessandro asked, setting his backpack with the journals on the table. We wait. The other guardians are on their way. Others? Do you think the Catholic Church is the only institution that knows the truth? The threat we face transcends religion and time. There are guardians in many traditions, Buddhist monks, Kabbalistic rabbis, shamanic elders, Sufi imams, all part of an ancient network dedicated to maintaining the balance, to keeping the veil intact. And when they arrive, Vittorio looked Alessandro in the eye. A new guardian must be chosen, someone to take up Father Pio's mantle, to bear the burden, to serve as vessel. Alessandro took a step back. You mean me? Vittorio nodded slowly. This is not a choice made lightly, and it must be voluntary, always voluntary. And if I refuse, we will seek another path. But without a new guardian, the veil will keep weakening, and what lies beyond will finally come through. And what exactly lies beyond? Vittorio fell silent for a long moment. If I told you the whole truth now, you might go mad before making your choice. Suffice it to say, they are beings older than humanity, older even than our concept of time. Some called them gods, others demons. Ancient texts refer to them as the awaiters or the pre-ancients. But those are just names for the unnameable. Alessandro sat heavily on a stone bench, the weight of the past hours, bearing down on him. His faith, his understanding of the world, and his own religion, all were being reshaped by revelations few humans would ever know. "How long do I have to decide?" he asked. "Until dawn," Vittorio replied. "When the first rays of sunlight touch the mountain summit, the ceremony must begin or fail. And the Pope, the Vatican, do they know everything? Some do, others do not. Knowledge is compartmentalized, guarded. Even within the church hierarchy, only a few know the full truth." Alessandro gazed at the journals he had preserved. For so many years, so many secrets and confessions of Father Pio never made public. Was this the true purpose of collecting them? Preparation for a role he had never imagined? "I have one last question," he said. "If I accept, what will my life be like?" Vittorio sighed heavily. Isolation, constant pain, visions of what lies beyond the veil, but also purpose, the highest purpose a human can have, to protect not only humanity but reality itself as we know it. Outside the cave, forces moved unseen in the darkness. In the Vatican, the Pope and his advisors charted inexplicable activity converging on Monte Sant'Angelo. On the roads, vehicles carrying the other guardians raced against time, and in dimensions adjacent to ours, they watched and waited, pressing against a barrier ever thinning, yearning for the world that once belonged to them, before light, before order, before time itself. You who read this account may wonder, are we truly alone in our universe? Or do ancient, powerful presences watch and wait beyond the threshold of human perception? And if the old barriers are indeed failing, what would you be willing to sacrifice to keep them intact?